Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Perfect Lives. Matt Anthony adjusted his tie as he walked through the spacious foyer of his suburban mansion. At 38, he was the picture of success, a cybersecurity consultant who'd built his company from the ground up, now worth 8 figures. His penetrating green eyes and methodical mind had made him one of the most sought-after experts in corporate digital security. "Dad, when are they starting the kitchen?" 12-year-old Oliver called from the living room, not looking up from his video game. "Steve and his crew should be here any minute," Matt replied, checking his watch. The kitchen renovation had been Lindsay's idea, their final home improvement project, she'd said. After 15 years of marriage, she claimed she wanted to create new memories in their dream kitchen. Lindsay Anthony descended the stairs, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. At 35, she still turned heads wherever she went. She worked as a real estate agent for high-end properties, a job that kept her busy with clients at all hours. Her blue eyes sparkled with an excitement that Matt had come to associate with her renovation projects. "I can't wait to see the new design come to life," she said, kissing Matt's cheek. "Brian from the design firm will be stopping by later to check on the progress." Matt nodded absently. Brian English had been Lindsay's business partner for the past 3 years, handling the staging and interior design aspects of her luxury property sales. The man rubbed Matt the wrong way. Too smooth, too eager to please Lindsay, but he couldn't deny Brian's success in the business. "Anna, breakfast." Lindsay called upstairs to their 10-year-old daughter. The sound of heavy trucks pulling into their driveway interrupted the morning routine. Through the window, Matt saw Steve Black's construction crew unloading equipment. Steve was a third-generation contractor, known throughout the county for his craftsmanship and discretion. Matt had chosen him specifically because Steve's family had worked on some of the oldest homes in the area, including several properties with interesting histories. Steve Black was a mountain of a man with calloused hands and sharp eyes that missed nothing. His grandfather had built half the town, and Steve had inherited both the family business and an uncanny ability to read the bones of old houses. At 52, he'd seen everything from hidden safes to Prohibition-era tunnels. "Morning, Matt," Steve said as he approached the front door. "Ready to tear into that kitchen?" "All yours," Matt replied. "Lindsay's got the plans if you need them." As the crew began setting up, Matt gathered his laptop and briefcase. He had a big client presentation that afternoon, a Fortune 500 company that had suffered a major data breach. These were the cases that had built his reputation, finding the unfindable, exposing the hidden vulnerabilities that others missed. "I'll be back around 6, Matt told Lindsay. "Try not to let them destroy the whole house." Lindsay laughed, the sound light and carefree. "It's going to be perfect. You'll see." Matt drove to his office, a sleek building downtown that housed Anthony's cybersecurity solutions. His team of 20 specialists handled everything from corporate espionage to identity theft cases. What most people didn't know was that Matt's real expertise lay in digital forensics, tracking down evidence that people thought they'd hidden forever. The morning flew by as Matt prepared for his presentation. Between meetings, he found himself thinking about the renovation. Something about Lindsay's enthusiasm felt forced, almost manic. She'd been different lately, more secretive about her phone calls, staying out later with clients, and pushing hard for this particular renovation project. His assistant knocked on his door. "Matt, your wife called. She said there's been a change of plans with the renovation, but not to worry about it." Matt frowned. "What kind of change?" "She didn't say. Just that she'd explain when you got home." The presentation went flawlessly, as usual. Matt's client was impressed by his thorough analysis of their security vulnerabilities. But throughout the afternoon, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. His instincts had served him well in both business and life. They were telling him to pay attention now. As he drove home that evening, Matt noticed Brian English's silver BMW parked in his driveway. The man was there more often lately, always with some excuse about staging or design consultations. Matt made a mental note to ask Lindsay about it. The house was unusually quiet when he entered. Usually, The sounds of construction would echo through the walls, but today there was only silence. Matt set down his briefcase and called out, "Lindsay? Kids?" "We're in the backyard," came Lindsay's voice, slightly strained. Matt walked through the house toward the back door, noting the plastic sheeting that now covered the kitchen entrance. Steve's tools were scattered around, but there was no sign of the contractor himself. In the backyard, he found Lindsay, Brian, and both children sitting at the patio table. Oliver and Anna looked confused, while Lindsay appeared nervous. Brian wore his usual confident smile, but there was something different in his eyes, something calculating. "Where's Steve?" Matt asked. "He had to leave early," Lindsay said quickly. "Family emergency. He'll be back tomorrow to finish up." Matt studied her face. In 15 years of marriage, he'd learned to read Lindsay's tells. The slight twitch at the corner of her mouth, the way she avoided direct eye contact, she was lying. "Dad," the contractor man looked really scared, Anna said innocently. "He was talking to Mr. English about something in the wall." Brian's smile faltered for just a moment. "Just some old wiring issues. Nothing to worry about." Matt felt a chill run down his spine. His cybersecurity training had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, every instinct was screaming that something was very wrong in his own home. As the family headed inside for dinner, Matt made a decision. Tonight, he would start digging into his own life with the same thoroughness he applied to his clients' cases. Whatever Lindsay and Brian were hiding, he was going to find it. Chapter 2. The Discovery. Matt barely slept that night. Every creak of the house made him alert. Every shadow seemed to hold secrets. He rose before dawn and checked on the children, both sleeping peacefully in their rooms. Lindsay lay beside him, seemingly undisturbed, but Matt noticed her phone face down on the nightstand, which was unusual. At 6 a.m., he heard vehicles in the driveway. Through the bedroom window, he saw Steve Black's truck, but the contractor wasn't unloading equipment. Instead, Steve sat in his cab, engine running, staring at the house with an expression Matt had never seen before: fear. Matt dressed quietly and slipped outside through the front door. Steve noticed him approaching and rolled down his window, his weathered face pale despite the morning sun. "Steve? Everything all right?" The contractor looked around nervously. "Mr. Anthony, I need to talk to you." "Not here. Can you meet me at Murphy's Diner in 20 minutes? "What's this about?" "Just please. And don't tell your wife." 20 minutes later, Matt sat across from Steve in a corner booth at the local diner. The contractor's hands shook as he lifted his coffee cup. "I've been building and renovating houses for 30 years, Steve began. "My grandfather told me stories about the old days, about houses with secrets, but I never thought." He trailed off, staring into his cup. "Steve, what did you find in my wall?" The contractor reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. With trembling fingers, he showed Matt a photo. The image was dark and grainy, taken with the phone's flashlight, but clear enough to make Matt's blood run cold. Behind the kitchen wall, in a hidden cavity, were stacks of plastic-wrapped packages. But it wasn't drugs or money, it was photographs. Hundreds of them, scattered and bundled. Even in the poor lighting, Matt could make out faces. Young faces. Children's faces. "There's more," Steve whispered. "Documents. Names. Addresses. And..." He swiped to another photo. "This." The second image showed a small digital storage device and what appeared to be a list of locations. At the top of the list, in Lindsay's handwriting, were the words "acquisition schedule." Matt felt sick. How long has this been there? The cavity was sealed recently. Maybe 6 months, based on the drywall compound. But Mr. Anthony... Steve leaned forward. "Yesterday evening, after I found this, your wife's business partner showed up. He knew exactly where to look. He wasn't surprised. Brian English. He offered me $50,000 to forget what I saw. When I refused, he made it clear that my family's safety depended on my silence." Steve's voice cracked. "I've got grandchildren, Mr. Anthony, but I can't live with this." Matt's mind raced, processing the implications. His wife, the mother of his children, was involved in something that required hiding evidence behind walls. And Brian English was in on it. "I need you to do something for me," Matt said, pulling out his own phone. I need you to go back to the house and continue working as if nothing happened. Can you do that? Steve nodded reluctantly. What about the evidence? Leave it exactly where it is. But I need you to install something for me. Matt showed Steve a small device from his cybersecurity kit. It's a wireless camera, battery-powered, motion-activated. Hide it where it can monitor that wall cavity. You think they'll come back for it? I'm counting on it. After Steve left, Matt sat in his car outside the diner, fighting waves of nausea. The woman he'd loved for 15 years, the mother of his children, was involved in something that required hiding evidence. The implications were too horrific to fully process. He called his office and cleared his schedule, then drove to a secure facility across town where he kept sensitive equipment for high-level cybersecurity operations. From a locked safe, he retrieved several devices, GPS trackers, listening devices, and a sophisticated phone cloning tool that could mirror Lindsay's communications. Matt Anthony had spent years hunting digital predators and exposing corporate criminals. Now, he would turn those same skills on his own family. Returning home, he found Lindsay in the living room, talking quietly on her phone. She ended the call quickly when she saw him. "You're home early," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Wanted to check on the renovation progress. In the kitchen, Steve was working normally, installing new cabinets with professional efficiency. He caught Matt's eye briefly and gave an almost imperceptible nod. The camera was in place. "Brian stopped by again this morning," Lindsay said casually. "He wanted to review the staging timeline for the Pemberton property." Matt knew the Pemberton property, a massive estate Lindsay had been trying to sell for months. A lot of coordination for one listing. It's a complicated sale. International buyers, multiple inspections. You know how it is. Matt didn't know how it was. He'd investigated enough money laundering operations to recognize the language. International buyers, multiple inspections, complicated sales, all phrases that could cover a multitude of illegal activities. That afternoon, while Lindsay took the children to soccer practice, Matt began his investigation in earnest. Using techniques he'd perfected in corporate espionage cases, he deployed GPS trackers on both Lindsay's car and Brian's BMW. He installed keystroke loggers on Lindsay's laptop and cloned her phone to mirror all calls and texts to a secure device. By evening, he had established a complete surveillance network around his own family. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent his career protecting people from exactly this kind of invasion of privacy. But as he tucked Oliver and Anna into bed that night, listening to their innocent chatter about school and friends, Matt knew he had to see this through. Whatever Lindsay and Brian were involved in, whatever those photographs and documents represented, his children's safety depended on uncovering the truth. Later that night, as Lindsay slept beside him, Matt's cloned phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "Package confirmed for tomorrow night. Same location. Everything must be ready." The response came from Lindsay's phone. "B has handled the contractor problem. We're clear to proceed." Matt stared at the messages, his heart pounding. Tomorrow night, whatever operation they were running would continue, and he would be ready for them. Chapter 3. Unraveling Truth. Matt spent the morning in his home office, ostensibly working on client cases while actually monitoring the feeds from his surveillance network. The wireless camera Steve had hidden near the wall cavity showed no activity, but the GPS trackers told a different story. At 9:17 a.m., Lindsay's car had made an unscheduled stop at a warehouse district across town. She'd stayed there for exactly 37 minutes before proceeding to her real estate office. Brian's BMW had been at the same location, arriving 20 minutes before Lindsay and leaving 5 minutes after her. Matt pulled up property records for the warehouse. The building was owned by a shell company called Meridian Holdings, registered in Delaware with minimal public information. Using his cybersecurity tools, he dug deeper into the company's digital footprint. What he found made his stomach turn. Meridian Holdings had connections to 3 other properties in different states. Cross-referencing the addresses with federal databases, Matt discovered that 2 of these locations had been raided by the FBI in the past 18 months. The charges: human trafficking and exploitation of minors. The 3rd location was still active. Matt's phone buzzed with another mirrored message from Lindsay's device. This time it was a photo, a young girl, maybe 13, with frightened eyes. Below the image was a price, $50,000. Matt rushed to the bathroom and vomited. When he returned to his desk, there were more messages. Location coordinates, pickup times, client preferences. His wife wasn't just involved in trafficking, she was running a procurement operation. The front door slammed, announcing Lindsay's return. Matt quickly secured his monitoring devices and composed himself. When Lindsay entered his office, she was carrying coffee and wearing her brightest smile. "How's work going?" she asked, setting a cup on his desk. "Fine. Busy day." Matt studied her face, looking for any sign of the monster he now knew her to be. But Lindsay looked exactly as she always had, beautiful, confident, loving. "I need to run some errands this afternoon," she said. "Brian and I have a client meeting for the Pemberton property. International buyers, very exclusive. What time will you be back?" "Late. These overseas clients prefer evening meetings." She kissed his forehead. "Don't wait up." After Lindsay left, Matt called Steve Black. "The camera has been transmitting all morning," Steve reported. "No one's been near the wall. But I've got the rest of that cavity mapped out now. There's a tunnel behind it. A tunnel connects to the storm drain system. Someone could access that hiding spot from outside the house without ever entering through the doors." Matt felt pieces clicking into place. Lindsay had chosen this house specifically. The renovation wasn't about creating new memories. It was about accessing an existing network. That evening, Matt told the children he had to work late and arranged for them to sleep at their grandmother's house. Then he prepared for surveillance. He loaded his car with long-range cameras, listening devices, and a GPS tracker that could be attached to vehicles from a distance. At 9 p.m., he positioned himself near the warehouse where Lindsay and Brian had met that morning. The building appeared abandoned, but Matt's thermal imaging equipment detected heat signatures inside. Multiple people moving around. At 9:47 p.m., Brian's BMW arrived, followed by Lindsay's car and a black van. Matt used his long-range camera to document everything. Through the lens, he watched as 3 men emerged from the van. One was clearly a client, expensive suit, nervous demeanor. The other 2 were security. Lindsay and Brian led them into the warehouse. Using a parabolic microphone, Matt caught fragments of conversation, fresh inventory, premium selection, completely untraceable. His hands shook as he recorded everything. These weren't abstract criminals he was investigating. This was his wife, casually discussing the sale of human beings. At 11:15 p.m., the group emerged from the warehouse. The client appeared satisfied, shaking hands with both Lindsay and Brian. Money changed hands, thick envelopes that Brian pocketed. As the vehicles prepared to leave, Matt saw something that made his blood freeze. A figure was loaded from the warehouse into the van, small, clearly young, struggling weakly against restraints. Matt followed the van at a distance, using his GPS tracker to maintain surveillance without being detected. The van led him to an upscale neighborhood 40 minutes away, stopping at a mansion with high walls and security gates. He documented the address, the license plates, and the transfer of the victim. By the time he returned home, it was 3 a.m., and Lindsay was already asleep. The next morning, Matt contacted Detective Rosa Nixon, a federal agent he'd worked with on cybercrime cases. They met at a secure location where Matt presented his evidence. The photos from the wall cavity, surveillance footage from the warehouse, financial records he'd uncovered about Meridian Holdings, and the documented human trafficking transaction. "This is beyond local jurisdiction," Detective Nixon said grimly. "I need to bring in federal task force agents." "But Matt," she paused, "your wife is going to prison for the rest of her life. Are you prepared for that? What about my children? They'll be safe. We'll make sure of that. But you need to stay close to your normal routine until we can move. If Lindsay suspects anything, I understand. There's something else. We've been tracking this network for 2 years. Your wife and her partner are significant players, but they're not the top of the organization. We need them to lead us to the leadership." Matt nodded, though the weight of the decision pressed down on him. He would have to continue living with Lindsay, pretending everything was normal, while federal agents built their case. How long? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Can you do it? Matt thought about the children in those photographs, about the young girl loaded into the van, about Oliver and Anna sleeping safely in their beds. I can do it. But as he drove home, Matt Anthony began planning something the federal agents didn't know about, something they wouldn't approve of. Because while Detective Nixon was focused on building a legal case, Matt was planning something much more personal. The people who had turned his wife into a monster, who had threatened his children's safety, who had used his home as part of their network, they were going to pay in ways the justice system couldn't deliver. Chapter 4. The Hunter's Patience. 2 weeks of living a lie nearly broke Matt's sanity. Every morning, he kissed Lindsay goodbye, knowing she would spend her day pricing human lives. Every evening, she returned home with stories about property showings and client meetings, while Matt's surveillance devices recorded the truth. But Matt Anthony hadn't built a cybersecurity empire by breaking under pressure. He'd learned patience from years of tracking sophisticated criminals who thought they were untouchable. Now he applied that same methodical approach to his own life. During the day, while Lindsay worked her trafficking operations, Matt coordinated with Detective Nixon's federal task force. They'd identified 17 victims in the network, ranging in age from 12 to 17. The organization spanned 4 states and had connections to international trafficking rings. More importantly, they'd identified the leadership, a man named Howard Wolf, who operated from a compound in rural Montana, and his lieutenant, Daniel Shelton, who ran the East Coast operations from a legitimate shipping company. Your wife reports directly to Shelton, Detective Nixon explained during one of their secure meetings. She's not just procurement. She's operational management for this entire region. Matt absorbed this information with cold clarity. Lindsay wasn't a victim or a reluctant participant. She was a willing architect. The federal case is solid, Nixon continued. But we need one more piece. We need documentation of the financial network. Without that, we can't seize the assets or break the money trail. What kind of documentation? Digital records, bank accounts, transaction logs, client databases. The kind of thing your wife would have access to. Matt smiled grimly. Leave that to me. That evening, while Lindsay attended another client meeting, Matt implemented the most sophisticated digital infiltration of his career. Using techniques he developed for corporate espionage, he accessed Lindsay's encrypted files, her hidden email accounts, and her secure cloud storage. What he found exceeded even the federal agents' expectations. Lindsay maintained detailed records of every transaction, every victim, every client. She documented the network's entire operation with the same meticulous attention to detail she'd once applied to real estate transactions. Client preferences, delivery schedules, financial transfers, everything was recorded. But Matt also found something else, a file labeled insurance. Opening it, he discovered that Lindsay had been documenting her own operations as protection against her partners. She'd recorded conversations with Howard Wolf and Daniel Shelton, photographed money transfers, and maintained detailed logs of every illegal activity she participated in. Lindsay had been planning to betray the network all along. The next morning, Matt called Detective Nixon with an encrypted phone. I have everything you need. Financial records, client databases, operational documentation. The entire network. How comprehensive? Comprehensive enough to shut down operations in 4 states and put 23 people in prison for life. Matt, this is incredible work, but we still need to coordinate the arrests carefully. If we move too soon, I understand, but there's something else. Matt's voice grew cold. I've found evidence that they're planning to relocate the operation. Next week, they're going to disappear. This was a lie, but Matt needed to accelerate the timeline. Because while the federal agents were building their case, Matt was building something else entirely. Over the next 3 days, Matt used his access to Lindsay's network to gather intelligence on every person involved in the operation. He learned their schedules, their security arrangements, their personal weaknesses. He identified the locations where victims were held and the routes used for transportation. Most importantly, he discovered that the network had a fatal vulnerability. Their communication system relied on encrypted messages that were automatically deleted after 48 hours. But Matt's cybersecurity expertise allowed him to intercept and preserve every message. Using this access, Matt began implementing his own plan. On Thursday evening, he sent carefully crafted messages to key members of the network, using Lindsay's credentials. Each message contained just enough information to create suspicion and paranoia. He made it appear that different members were planning to cooperate with federal investigators. By Friday morning, the network was in chaos. Howard Wolf was demanding an emergency meeting. Daniel Shelton was questioning everyone's loyalty. Lower-level operators were looking for exits. And Lindsay was panicking. "Something's wrong," she told Brian during a phone call that Matt intercepted. "Howard thinks someone's talking to the feds. He wants all regional managers of the compound by Sunday. All of us." Brian's voice was strained. "That's never happened before." He's scared. And when Howard gets scared, people disappear. Matt smiled as he listened to the conversation. His psychological manipulation was working perfectly. By creating the impression that the network was compromised, he was forcing them to make desperate moves that would expose their entire operation. But Matt had a more personal agenda than just helping the federal case. That Saturday night, while Lindsay prepared for a trip to Montana, Matt made his own preparations. In his secure workshop, he assembled equipment that would never appear in any federal evidence locker. Untraceable communication devices, surveillance gear that couldn't be traced back to him, and other tools from his cybersecurity operations that operated in legal gray areas. On Sunday morning, Lindsay kissed him goodbye, claiming she was attending a real estate conference in Denver. She would be gone for 3 days. Matt waited exactly 1 hour after her departure before implementing the final phase of his plan. Using the network's own communication system, he sent a single message to Howard Wolf. Using Daniel Shelton's credentials, federal investigation confirmed. Full network compromised. Initiating emergency protocols. Then he sent a message to Daniel Shelton. Using Howard Wolf's credentials, security breach traced to East Coast operations. Contain immediately. And finally, he sent a message to both men, using Lindsay's credentials. Evidence suggests inside betrayal. Recommend immediate shutdown of all operations and elimination of potential witnesses. Within hours, the network began destroying itself from within. As Matt monitored the chaos unfolding through his surveillance network, he felt no satisfaction, only cold determination. The federal agents would get their prosecutions and their justice system victory. But Matt Anthony was playing a longer game. By the time this was over, everyone who had threatened his family would understand exactly what happened when someone crossed a man who made his living finding people who thought they were unfindable. Chapter 5. The Web Titans. The network's self-destruction exceeded even Matt's calculated expectations. By Monday evening, intercepted communications revealed that Howard Wolf had ordered the elimination of 3 regional managers, convinced they were federal informants. Daniel Shelton had responded by moving all East Coast assets to secure locations and implementing radio silence protocols. And Lindsay was trapped in Montana, unable to communicate with anyone without confirming suspicions of betrayal. Matt coordinated with Detective Nixon to ensure the federal task force was positioned to capitalize on the chaos. "They're going to start eliminating evidence and witnesses," he warned during a secure call. "If you're going to move, it has to be now." "We're ready," Nixon confirmed. "Teams are in position at 6 locations. But Matt, once we start this, there's no going back. Your wife will get exactly what she deserves." That Tuesday morning, as federal agents prepared for coordinated raids across 4 states, Matt received an encrypted call on Lindsay's phone. The caller ID showed Daniel Shelton. "Lindsay, thank God." Shelton's voice was strained. "Where are you?" Matt had spent days studying Lindsay's speech patterns and responses. Using a voice modulation app, he replied in her tone, "Safe house in Denver." "What's happening?" "Howard's lost his mind. He thinks you're all informants. He's ordered termination protocols for everyone below his level. All of us. Everyone. I've got teams moving to secure positions. You need to get to the secondary location in Colorado Springs. Tonight." Matt smiled grimly. The secondary location in Colorado Springs was already under federal surveillance. Shelton was unknowingly walking into a trap. Daniel, what about the evidence at my house? The backup files. Burn everything. The whole operation is compromised. Understood. After ending the call, Matt immediately contacted Detective Nixon. They're moving tonight. Colorado Springs location. And they're planning to destroy evidence at my house. We'll have teams at both locations. But Matt had already anticipated this moment. That afternoon, while federal agents prepared their operations, he drove to a secure storage facility where he'd hidden copies of every piece of evidence he'd gathered. Financial records, surveillance footage, client databases. Everything was preserved in multiple formats. The federal case would proceed regardless of what happened to the evidence in his house. But Matt's personal mission required a different approach. That evening, he waited in his darkened home office, monitoring security cameras he'd installed throughout the property. At 11:47 p.m., two figures approached the house through the storm drain tunnel that connected to the hidden wall cavity. Matt recognized both men from his surveillance, Brian English and a security contractor named Pete Shelton, Daniel's brother. They'd come to destroy the evidence and, based on intercepted communications, eliminate any witnesses who might compromise the operation. Through his security monitors, Matt watched them enter the tunnel system and approach the wall cavity. They worked efficiently, removing the hidden photographs and documents. But they didn't know about the surveillance cameras, and they didn't know that Matt had already copied everything. As they prepared to leave, Brian made a phone call. Matt's listening devices picked up both sides of the conversation. Evidence secured, Brian reported. What about the contractor? Came the reply. Daniel Shelton's voice. Steve Black? We handled that yesterday. Matt's blood ran cold. Steve Black, the contractor who discovered the evidence and tried to do the right thing, was dead. And the family? The husband and children are scheduled for tomorrow. House fire. Electrical failure during renovation. Matt closed his eyes, fighting rage that threatened to overwhelm his careful planning. They intended to murder his children to cover their tracks. But this revelation only confirmed that his approach was correct. The federal justice system would prosecute these people, but it couldn't protect future victims from the network's retribution. Some threats required a more permanent solution. As Brian and Pete finished their work in the tunnel, Matt moved to the next phase of his plan. Using their own communication network against them, he sent a series of messages designed to create maximum chaos. To Howard Wolf, he sent evidence that Daniel Shelton was cooperating with federal agents. To Daniel Shelton, he sent proof that Howard Wolf had ordered his assassination. To both men, he provided location data suggesting that Brian English was providing information to federal investigators. By midnight, the entire network was in open warfare against itself. Federal raids began at 3 a.m. across 4 states. Detective Nixon's teams arrested 17 people in coordinated operations, seizing financial assets, computer systems, and rescuing 9 victims who were in immediate danger. But the leadership, Howard Wolf, Daniel Shelton, and several key operators, had already disappeared into secure locations, alerted by the network's paranoid communication patterns. Lindsay, trapped in Montana with limited communication access, became a federal fugitive when agents raided her hotel room and found only surveillance equipment indicating she'd been monitoring federal law enforcement frequencies. By dawn, the trafficking network had been shattered, but its most dangerous members remained free. And Matt Anthony was just getting started. On Wednesday morning, he received a call from an unknown number. The voice was mechanically altered, but the message was clear. Mr. Anthony, you've caused considerable disruption to our operations. We'd like to discuss terms for resolution. Who is this? Someone with significant resources and a strong interest in protecting our mutual interests. We have something you want, and you have something we need. I'm listening. Your wife is alive and in our custody. Your children's safety can be guaranteed. In exchange, you'll provide us with the locations of all evidence you've gathered, and you'll cease any cooperation with federal authorities. Matt felt ice in his veins. Prove she's alive. Check your email. The photo showed Lindsay, bound and blindfolded, holding a newspaper with yesterday's date. She appeared unharmed, but terrified. "You have 24 hours to consider our offer," the voice continued. "Instructions will follow." After the call ended, Matt sat in his office, staring at the photo. The network's leadership had survived the federal raids and was now using Lindsay as leverage to protect themselves. They'd made a fatal miscalculation. They thought they were dealing with a desperate husband who would sacrifice everything to save his wife. They didn't understand that Matt Anthony had already calculated the cost of Lindsay's choices and found her life less valuable than the lives of the children she'd helped traffic. But they'd also given him exactly what he needed: a way to locate the network's leadership and finish what the federal agents couldn't complete. Matt opened his secure communication system and began the final phase of his plan. By the time this was over, the trafficking network would be permanently destroyed, and everyone who'd threatened his children would be dead. The federal justice system would handle the prosecutions. Matt Anthony would handle the rest. Chapter 6. Setting the Trap. Matt had 24 hours to craft the perfect response to the network's ultimatum. He spent the first 12 hours analyzing every piece of intelligence he'd gathered, mapping the relationships between surviving network members and identifying their psychological pressure points. Howard Wolf operated from a compound in rural Montana, but Matt's digital forensics had revealed that Wolf had a weakness: a daughter attending college in California under an assumed identity. Daniel Shelton, despite his criminal enterprises, maintained legitimate shipping operations that required regulatory compliance and public visibility. Both men thought they were untouchable in their secure locations. Matt was about to prove them wrong. On Thursday morning, he called Detective Nixon with a proposal that made her deeply uncomfortable. "You want us to let you negotiate with terrorists," she said. "I want you to let me deliver them to you," Matt corrected. "The federal case is solid, but you've only arrested the operational level. The leadership is still out there, and they'll rebuild within 6 months. What are you proposing?" "I go in as a negotiator. They want their evidence back and my silence. I give them a location for a trade, Lindsay for the files. But the location is your kill box. Matt, that's using your wife as bait. My wife helped traffic children. She's already dead to me. The question is whether we use her death to stop this permanently or let the network regroup and continue destroying lives." Nixon was quiet for a long moment. "What you're suggesting is the only way to finish this. These people murdered Steve Black and planned to kill my children. The federal court system will give them 25 to life. I'm offering you a chance to make sure they never hurt anyone again. I can't officially approve this. Then officially, you don't know about it." That afternoon, Matt responded to the network's demands with a carefully crafted proposal. He would provide the location of all evidence in exchange for Lindsay's safe return. The exchange would take place at an abandoned mining facility in Nevada, neutral territory that both sides could approach with security. What Matt didn't tell them was that the mining facility was owned by one of his cybersecurity clients, and he'd spent the past week installing comprehensive surveillance and defensive systems throughout the complex. The network's response came quickly. They would bring Lindsay to the facility at midnight Friday. Matt would arrive alone with the evidence. Any sign of federal presence would result in Lindsay's immediate execution. Matt agreed to their terms, then spent Thursday evening making preparations that would have horrified the federal agents if they'd known about them. In his secure workshop, Matt assembled equipment that fell well outside the boundaries of legal surveillance. Explosive devices designed to look like standard electronics, weapon systems that could be remotely activated, and communication jammers that would prevent anyone from calling for help. Most importantly, he prepared a final surprise for the network's leadership. A piece of malware he developed for high-level corporate espionage that could take control of any electronic device within range and turn it into a surveillance tool or weapon. On Friday morning, Matt received confirmation that Howard Wolf himself would be present at the exchange, along with Daniel Shelton and a security team of 8 men. They were bringing enough firepower to wage a small war, convinced that overwhelming force would guarantee their safety. Matt smiled as he read their operational plan, intercepted through their encrypted communications. They planned to kill him immediately after confirming the evidence location, then disappear with Lindsay as insurance against future federal investigations. They had no idea that Matt Anthony had spent 15 years learning how to turn other people's certainties against them. At 6 p.m., Matt called his children, who were staying with Lindsay's sister in California. Oliver and Anna were safe, thousands of miles from the coming confrontation, believing their parents were handling business problems. "When will Mom be home?" Anna asked. "Soon, sweetheart. Everything will be back to normal very soon." It wasn't a lie. After tonight, everything would be normal for his children. They would grieve for their mother, but they would be safe. The network that had threatened their lives would be gone forever. At 10 p.m., Matt drove toward Nevada, carrying a briefcase containing what appeared to be comprehensive evidence files. In reality, the briefcase contained decoy materials and a sophisticated explosive device that would detonate on remote command. The real evidence was already in federal custody, copied and distributed to multiple agencies to ensure the prosecutions would proceed regardless of what happened tonight. As he approached the mining facility, Matt activated the defensive systems he'd installed throughout the complex. Motion sensors, infrared cameras, and automated response protocols came online. If anyone tried to leave the facility without his authorization, they would discover that the abandoned mine was now the most sophisticated kill box ever constructed by a cybersecurity expert with unlimited resources and no concern for legal boundaries. At 11:47 p.m., Matt received a message on his secure phone. "Targets approaching. Multiple vehicles. Confirm you're ready." Matt typed his response, "Ready." But the message hadn't come from Detective Nixon or the federal task force. It had come from Nate McKenna, a private military contractor Matt had worked with on corporate security operations. McKenna's team was positioned around the mining facility, armed and authorized to ensure that no one left alive except Matt. The federal agents would find the network's leadership dead and all evidence pointing to internal warfare within the trafficking organization. There would be no trial, no appeals, no chance for the network to rebuild. At midnight, headlights appeared in the distance, approaching the mining facility. Howard Wolf, Daniel Shelton, and their security team were walking into a trap that would end the network permanently. Matt Anthony had spent his career protecting people from digital predators. Tonight, he would finish the job with methods that the justice system couldn't provide. As the vehicles entered the kill box, Matt armed his final surprise: malware that would record everything that happened next and automatically upload the footage to federal authorities, providing perfect evidence of the trafficking network's violent end. The hunt was over. The reckoning was about to begin. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The mining facility at midnight looked like something from a post-apocalyptic film. Abandoned structures silhouetted against the Nevada sky, surrounded by rusted equipment and deep shafts that disappeared into darkness. Matt had chosen the location specifically for its isolation and the psychological advantage it would provide. 3 vehicles approached through the desert. A black SUV carrying Howard Wolf and Daniel Shelton, followed by 2 tactical vehicles with their security team. Matt watched through thermal imaging as 9 heavily armed men took positions around the facility, thinking they were establishing tactical superiority. They had no idea that every movement was being recorded by hidden cameras, every word picked up by directional microphones, and every electronic device they carried was now compromised by Matt's malware. At 12:07 a.m., Howard Wolf's voice echoed across the empty facility. "Anthony, show yourself." Matt emerged from a main building, briefcase in hand, moving with deliberate calm. He'd spent years negotiating with corporate criminals who thought they held all the cards. Tonight was just another negotiation, except the stakes were personal. "Where's my wife?" Matt called out. "She's safe," Daniel Shelton replied, stepping into view. Even in the moonlight, Matt could see the man's expensive suit and confident demeanor. For now, Howard Wolf appeared next, a mountain of a man with cold eyes and scarred hands. At 62, he'd built his trafficking empire through 3 decades of violence and intimidation. He looked at Matt with the casual contempt of a predator evaluating prey. "You've caused us considerable trouble, Mr. Anthony," Wolf said. "Lost us millions in assets. Got several of our people arrested. You made it personal when you threatened my children." "Nothing personal about business. Your wife was an asset. You were a security risk. Assets get protected. Risks get eliminated. Show me Lindsay. Wolf gestured to one of his men, who opened the rear door of the SUV. Lindsay stumbled out, her hands zip-tied, a blindfold covering her eyes. Even from a distance, Matt could see she was terrified. She's been very cooperative, Shelton said. Provided us with detailed information about your investigation methods. Remarkable how quickly people's loyalties change when their survival is at stake. Matt felt a cold satisfaction. Even now, Lindsay was betraying him, probably hoping her cooperation would save her life. She still didn't understand that her life had ended the moment he'd discovered those photographs in the wall. The evidence, Wolf demanded. All of it. Files, recordings, digital copies. Matt held up the briefcase. Everything's here. Financial records, client databases, surveillance footage. The complete federal investigation file. Toss it over. My wife first. Wolf laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Your wife comes with us. Insurance against future problems. The evidence gets examined. If it's complete and accurate, maybe she lives long enough to see Christmas. Matt had expected this betrayal. It was exactly what he would have done in Wolf's position. Take the evidence and keep the leverage. No deal, Matt said. We do this simultaneously or nobody gets anything. You're not in a position to negotiate, Shelton called out. We have 9 guns trained on you right now. And I have federal agents positioned around this facility, Matt replied, knowing it was a lie that would create exactly the reaction he needed. The response was immediate. Security team members began reporting movement in the shadows, imaginary federal agents that their paranoia conjured from every wind-blown piece of debris. Boss, we've got possible movement on the South Ridge, one of them radioed. North side clear, but thermal's picking up something weird. Matt smiled. His psychological manipulation was working perfectly. By suggesting federal presence, he'd activated the network's deepest fear and turned their own security protocols against them. How many agents? Wolf demanded. Enough, Matt replied. This was never about a trade. This was about bringing you into the open. It was then that Howard Wolf made his fatal mistake. Convinced he was about to be surrounded by federal agents, he decided to eliminate the immediate threat and fight his way out. Kill him, Wolf ordered. Take the briefcase and extract immediately. For security team members raised their weapons, aiming at Matt's position. But as they did, the facility's defensive systems activated. High-intensity floodlights blazed to life, temporarily blinding everyone in the open. The sound of gunfire erupted from multiple directions as Nate McKenna's team engaged the security personnel with precision sniper fire. But Matt's most devastating weapon was digital. As Wolf's men tried to coordinate their response using encrypted radios, Matt's malware turned their own communication devices against them. Their radios began broadcasting their positions to Matt's team while generating false reports of federal agents advancing from all directions. We're surrounded, someone screamed into the radio. Fall back to defensive positions. Where the hell are they coming from? In the chaos, Matt activated the briefcase's hidden payload. The explosion wasn't large, just enough to destroy the decoy evidence and create additional confusion. But the psychological effect was devastating. Howard Wolf, realizing he'd been outmaneuvered, grabbed Lindsay and pressed a gun to her head. Federal agents. I have a hostage. I want safe passage out of here. Matt stepped into the light, no longer pretending to be a desperate husband negotiating for his wife's safety. His voice was calm, cold, and utterly in control. There are no federal agents here, Howard. There's just me. That's impossible. The gunfire, private contractors, the communications interference, my malware, the surveillance, my equipment. You walked into a trap designed by someone who spent 15 years learning how to hunt people like you. For the first time, fear appeared in Howard Wolf's eyes. You're insane. I'm thorough. Lindsay, would you like to tell Howard about the evidence I've already provided to federal prosecutors? About the recordings I made of your conversations with Daniel? About the financial records that trace every transaction in your network? Lindsay's blindfolded face turned toward Matt's voice. Matt, please. Shut up. His voice cut through her pleading like a blade. You made your choice when you decided to traffic children, when you planned to murder our family to protect your operation, when you helped create a network that destroyed innocent lives for profit. Daniel Shelton, crouched behind the SUV, tried to organize a fighting retreat. But McKenna's team had positioned themselves with military precision. Every escape route was covered. "This is over," Matt announced. "Your network is finished. Your assets are seized. Your people are arrested. And now, you're all going to pay for what you've done." Howard Wolf pressed the gun harder against Lindsay's temple. "I'll kill her." "No," Matt said quietly. "You won't." He pressed a button on his phone, activating the final component of his trap. The abandoned mining equipment around the facility suddenly roared to life. Massive conveyors and crushing machines that hadn't operated in decades, now controlled by Matt's integrated systems. The sound was deafening, disorienting, and terrifying. But more importantly, it masked the movement of McKenna's team as they closed in for the final assault. What happened next took less than 60 seconds, but it ended a trafficking network that had operated with impunity for over a decade. When the gunfire stopped and the machinery fell silent, only Matt Anthony was left standing in the Nevada desert, surrounded by the bodies of people who had thought themselves untouchable. Lindsay lay motionless near the SUV, a victim of the violence she'd helped create. Daniel Shelton had died trying to reach his communication equipment. Howard Wolf's body was sprawled near the mining shaft where he'd made his final stand. Matt felt no satisfaction, no triumph. Only the cold certainty that his children were now safe from people who would have destroyed them without hesitation. As sirens approached in the distance, federal agents responding to automatically transmitted distress signals, Matt uploaded the final evidence package to secure servers around the world. Every client, every transaction, every detail of the trafficking network was now in the hands of law enforcement agencies across 3 countries. The federal case would proceed with or without the surviving defendants. The network was permanently destroyed, and the children who might have become future victims would never know how close they'd come to horror. Matt Anthony had spent his career protecting people from digital predators. Tonight, he completed that mission using methods that would never appear in any official report. Chapter 8, Aftermath. The federal crime scene team arrived at the mining facility at 3:17 a.m., expecting to process a hostage exchange gone wrong. What they found was something much more complex: the systematic elimination of a trafficking network's entire leadership structure, with evidence so comprehensive that it would reshape international law enforcement efforts. Detective Rosa Nixon was among the first investigators on scene. She found Matt Anthony sitting calmly in his car, hands visible on the steering wheel, waiting to be processed. His clothing was clean, his demeanor composed, and his story was simple. He'd arrived to negotiate for his wife's release and found himself caught in a firefight between network members and unknown assailants. "Unknown assailants?" Nixon asked during their preliminary interview. "I never saw them clearly," Matt replied. "The facility lighting was damaged early in the engagement. I took cover and waited for it to end." Ballistics evidence supported his account. Every fatal shot had been fired from sniper positions hundreds of yards away, using military-grade weapons that weren't registered to Matt or anyone in his immediate circle. The shooters had policed their brass and left no useful forensic evidence. The facility's security cameras had malfunctioned during the critical time frame, a convenient electrical failure that destroyed the digital storage systems just as the shooting began. "Mr. Anthony," Nixon said carefully, "you understand that multiple federal agencies are going to want to interview you about tonight's events. Of course, I want to cooperate fully with any investigation. And you understand that the deaths of 9 people, including your wife, are going to generate significant scrutiny." Matt met her eyes with the steady gaze of a man who'd calculated every possible outcome months in advance. "Detective, my wife was a willing participant in a trafficking network that destroyed children's lives. The people who died tonight were responsible for horrors that will take years to fully document. If someone took the law into their own hands to stop them," he paused, "that person probably saved more lives than we'll ever know. By dawn, The scope of the evidence began to emerge. Federal analysts worked through the night, processing the data Matt had provided, uncovering a trafficking network that spanned 4 countries and involved over 60 individuals in operational roles. The financial records alone revealed assets worth over $40 million, all of which could now be seized and used for victim compensation. The client databases contained names that would shock the public: politicians, business leaders, and public figures who had paid premium prices for access to trafficked children. More importantly, the network's communication logs provided intelligence that led to the rescue of 17 additional victims and the arrest of 12 network members who hadn't been present at the mining facility. By 10 a.m., Matt was released pending further investigation. Federal agencies had found no evidence connecting him to the deaths at the mining facility, and his cooperation in exposing the trafficking network made him a valuable witness rather than a suspect. He drove home to his empty house, where crime scene tape still marked the areas where evidence had been hidden. The kitchen renovation would never be completed. The house would be sold as part of the federal asset seizure, with proceeds going to victim compensation funds. At noon, Matt's phone rang. The caller ID showed Oliver's number. "Dad, we saw the news. Is Mom really?" Oliver's voice cracked. "Yes, son. She's gone. The news said she was involved with bad people." Matt closed his eyes, choosing his words carefully. "Your mother made some very poor choices, but that doesn't change the fact that she loved you and Anna very much. It was a lie, but one that his children needed to hear. They would learn the truth gradually, as they became old enough to understand the complexity of adult evil. For now, they needed to grieve their mother without the burden of knowing what she'd become. When are we coming home?" "You're not. We're starting over. New house, new city, new everything." Matt had already made arrangements with a client in Oregon who specialized in witness protection for corporate whistleblowers. Within a week, he and the children would disappear into new identities, protected by the same systems he developed to hide executives from corporate retaliation. The Anthony family would cease to exist, replaced by a family with no connection to trafficking networks or federal investigations. That afternoon, Matt met with Detective Nixon for a final debriefing. They sat in a secure conference room while federal prosecutors and analysts presented their findings. "The evidence you provided has given us the largest trafficking prosecution in U.S. history," the lead prosecutor announced. 47 defendants across 4 jurisdictions. Asset seizures totaling $63 million. An intelligence that's already disrupted 3 additional networks. "What about the children?" Matt asked. 17 victims recovered and receiving treatment. Another 23 identified through the network's records, with international cooperation to provide support services. Matt nodded. It was the outcome he'd worked toward, but the numbers couldn't capture the reality of lives destroyed and barely rescued. "There's one more thing," Detective Nixon said. "The investigation into the mining facility deaths. We found no evidence of your involvement, but you know I was involved. I know that 9 very dangerous people died in a way that prevented them from ever hurting anyone again. I know that without those deaths, the network's leadership would have disappeared and rebuilt their operation within 6 months. And I know that sometimes the justice system needs help from people who aren't constrained by legal limitations." Matt studied her face. "Are you asking me to confess to something?" "I'm telling you that as far as federal law enforcement is concerned, you're a hero who risked his life to expose a trafficking network and save children. What happened at that mining facility was an internal war between criminals that eliminated a major threat to public safety. And unofficially, I hope whoever was responsible sleeps well at night, because they did what needed to be done." 3 days later, Matt Anthony closed the accounts of his cybersecurity company and transferred all assets to a victim support foundation. He donated his house to federal authorities for asset seizure and said goodbye to a life he'd spent 15 years building. On Thursday morning, he picked up Oliver and Anna from their aunt's house in California. They drove north toward Oregon and their new life, while behind them, federal prosecutors began the largest trafficking trial in American history. The children asked few questions during the long drive. They were too young to fully understand what their mother had done, but old enough to sense that their old life was gone forever. "Dad," Anna asked as they crossed the Oregon border, "are we going to be okay?" Matt looked at his children in the rearview mirror, innocent faces that would never be threatened by the monsters who had used their home as part of a trafficking network. "We're going to be better than okay," he promised. "We're going to be safe." And for the first time in months, Matt Anthony allowed himself to believe that was true. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 6 months later, Michael Sullivan, formerly Matt Anthony, stood in the kitchen of a modest farmhouse outside Portland, Oregon, watching his children adapt to their new lives with the resilience that had always amazed him. Oliver, now 13, had joined the local soccer team and discovered a talent for computer programming that reminded Matt of his own younger years. Anna had found her place in the school's art program, creating paintings that were bright and hopeful, a stark contrast to the darkness they'd left behind. The federal trial had concluded 3 weeks earlier with guilty verdicts for all 47 defendants. The judge had handed down sentences ranging from 25 years to life without parole. Asset seizures had generated over $80 million for victim compensation, and international cooperation had dismantled trafficking networks in 7 countries. But Michael, rarely followed the news coverage. That chapter of his life was closed, sealed behind layers of legal protection and witness security protocols that made his new identity unbreachable. His new cybersecurity consulting firm specialized in protecting children's advocacy groups and victim support organizations. The work paid modestly compared to his previous corporate clients, but it provided something more valuable: the certainty that his skills were being used to protect rather than merely profit. On a Tuesday morning in spring, Michael received a secure message from Detective Nixon, one of only 3 people who knew his new location. The message contained a single photograph: a young girl, maybe 14, smiling at the camera from what appeared to be a group therapy session. The accompanying text read, "One of the rescued victims from your case. She's been adopted by a loving family and is doing well in school. Thought you'd want to know that the work was worth it." Michael studied the photograph for a long moment, then deleted the message according to security protocols. But he printed the photo and placed it in a secure file with 16 others. Images of children whose lives had been saved by the destruction of the trafficking network. They were his real victory, not the prosecutions or asset seizures or headlines about justice being served. Every smile in those photographs represented a life that would unfold naturally, free from the horror that Lindsay and her partners had planned to inflict. That afternoon, Anna burst through the front door with excitement that had become routine since their move to Oregon. "Dad, look what Mrs. Patterson said about my painting." She held up a drawing of their farmhouse, surrounded by fields and mountains, with 2 children and a man standing in front of it. The family was small but complete. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. She said I should enter it in the state competition. Will you help me with the application?" "Of course." As Anna ran upstairs to change clothes, Oliver appeared in the kitchen doorway. At 13, he was beginning to ask more sophisticated questions about their relocation and their mother's death. "Dad, I've been thinking about what happened to Mom." Michael set down his coffee and gave his son his full attention. "What about it?" "The news said she was involved with people who hurt kids. But she never hurt us." "No, she didn't." "Do you think she was trying to protect us from those people? Like, maybe she was involved because she didn't have a choice." Michael considered his response carefully. Oliver needed to process their mother's choices in a way that wouldn't destroy his ability to trust other people. The full truth, that Lindsay had been a willing architect of horror, would come later when Oliver was mature enough to handle it. "I think your mother made some very bad decisions that she thought would protect our family. Sometimes people convince themselves that doing wrong things for right reasons makes those things acceptable. But it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Wrong is wrong, regardless of the justification." Oliver nodded thoughtfully. "Is that why we moved here? To get away from all that wrongness. We moved here to start fresh, to build a life based on doing the right things for the right reasons." That evening, after the children were asleep, Michael sat on his front porch, looking out over farmland that stretched to the horizon. The stars were brighter here than they'd been in the suburbs, and the silence was complete except for natural sounds. His secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from an unknown sender. For a moment, Michael tensed. The message could represent a new threat, someone from the old network seeking revenge. But when he opened it, he found something unexpected. "Mr. Sullivan, my name is Gene Potts. I represent a group of parents whose children were rescued from trafficking operations last year. We would like to express our gratitude for the work you did to expose the network. We know you prefer privacy, but we wanted you to know that 17 families sleep better at night because of your courage." Attached to the message were 17 photographs, children in their new lives, safe homes, with families who would protect them. The images showed birthday parties, school graduations, sports teams, art projects, all the normal childhood experiences that would have been stolen from them. Michael looked at each photograph carefully, memorizing faces that represented the true measure of success. Then he deleted the message and added the photos to his secure file. The next morning, Anna asked if they could plant a garden behind the house. "What kind of garden?" Michael asked. "Flowers. Lots of different colors. I want to paint them when they bloom." "We can do that." As they worked in the soil that afternoon, turning the earth and planning where each flower would grow, Michael realized that this was what victory actually looked like. Not the destruction of enemies or the satisfaction of revenge, but the quiet creation of something beautiful and innocent. Oliver joined them after school, bringing seeds he'd selected for vegetables that could grow alongside Anna's flowers. As the three of them worked together in the spring sunshine, Michael understood that they had successfully escaped the darkness that had consumed their old life. The trafficking network was gone forever. The children who had been rescued were healing in safe homes. The federal justice system had processed the legal consequences of the crimes. And Michael Sullivan was building a new life focused on protection rather than revenge, creation rather than destruction. That evening, as he tucked Anna into bed, she asked the question that had been coming for months. "Dad, do you miss Mom?" Michael considered his answer carefully. "I miss the person I thought she was. I miss the family I thought we had. But I don't miss the person she actually became." "Do you think she loved us?" "I think she loved the idea of us. But love isn't just a feeling, Anna. Love is what you do to protect the people you care about. And your mother's actions showed that she was more concerned with protecting herself than protecting her family." Anna absorbed this with the seriousness that had developed since their move. "But you protected us, and I always will." As he turned off the lights and closed her door, Michael realized that Anna had identified the fundamental difference between himself and Lindsay. When faced with moral choices, Lindsay had consistently chosen self-preservation over protection of the innocent. Michael had chosen differently. 6 months after the destruction of the trafficking network, the world was measurably safer for children. Federal agencies had used the intelligence to disrupt related operations across 3 continents. Victim support organizations had received unprecedented funding, and 17 families had been reunited with children they thought they'd lost forever. But for Michael Sullivan, the real victory was much simpler. Oliver and Anna Sullivan were growing up in a safe home, building innocent lives, surrounded by people who would protect them from the monsters that existed in the world. On a clear spring evening in Oregon, as his children slept safely in their beds, Michael Anthony's mission was finally complete. The network was destroyed. The children were safe. Justice had been served. And a new family was growing, something beautiful in the soil where darkness had once taken root. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.